please stand for the reading of the gospel? The gospel reading is Mark, chapter 6, beginning with the first verse. He went away from there and came to his own country, and his disciples followed him. And on the Sabbath he began to teach in the synagogue, and many who heard him were astonished, saying, "Where did this man get all this? What is the wisdom given to him? What mighty works are wrought by his hands? Is this not the carpenter, the son of Mary, and brother of James and Joseph and Judas and Simon? And are not his sisters here with us?" And they took offense at him. And Jesus said to them, "A prophet is not without honor except in his own country and amongst his own kin and in his own house." And he could do no mighty work there, except that he laid his hands upon a few sick people and healed them. And he marveled because of their unbelief. And he went about among the villages teaching. And he called to him the 12, and began to send them out 2 by 2, and gave them authority over the unclean spirits. He charged them to take nothing with them for the journey, except a staff, no bread, no bag, no money in their belts, but to wear sandals, and not put on 2 tunics. And he said to them, "Where you enter a house, stay there until you leave the place. And if any place will not receive you, and they refuse to hear you, when you leave, shake off the dust that is on your feet for a testimony against them." So they went out and preached that men should repent. And they cast out many demons, and anointed with oil many that were sick, and healed them. This is the word of God for the people of God. Thanks be to God.
Jesus sent them out 2 by 2. It's interesting because in our world, in America, religion is thought of as such a private, personal matter, but Jesus didn't send them out 1 by 1. He sent them out 2 by 2. God's greatest gift to us, perhaps, is just good company. Good company. With the ark, the animals came in and out 2 by 2. I was thinking during our opening hymn, we sang that hymn at my wedding. We came here and we sang that. I've been blessed with good company in my life, friends, all kinds of people that you could share life with. We came across the other day that book we used to read to our children called "Will I Have a Friend?" It's the story of Jim going off to school for the first time, and Paul walks in there, and Jim says, "Will I have a friend?" And he looks around the school, and he's not sure he has a friend, but then Paul comes along, who has a little truck, and they play with the truck, and he comes home and he tells Paul, "I had a friend." So cool. 2 by 2. Jesus knew the importance of not being isolated because of what happened in Nazareth. This story is amazing. If you ever come to Israel with me, I'll take you to Nazareth, and it's fascinating. In Bible times, Nazareth was just a little tiny hamlet. There might have been 70 people that lived there. It was just in the middle of nowhere. Now it's a really busy, bustling city. The traffic's terrible. And it's an amazing city because it's one of the rare places in the world where Christians and Muslims live alongside one another peacefully. In fact, last time we were there, we were walking down, headed toward the basilica there, and ran into 2 guys beside each other. One was a Christian giving out free Bibles, and the next guy was a Muslim giving out free copies of the Quran. And we kind of spoke to them, and then as I walked away, no one was in front of them any longer, and they were laughing, and one had his arm around the other. Like, really cool. It's like a vision of world peace right there on the streets of Nazareth. When Jesus came back to Nazareth, though, you see, he'd grown up there, but then he goes away and he becomes this famous healer and teacher, and then he comes back home, and it's really hard to come back home with all of this, right, and have any respect, because it says his brothers and sisters were there, and you can imagine what they had to say, like, "He pulled my hair, he stole my toy, he ate the last biscuit." This is just what siblings do. I found when I go back home, kind of interesting, I've been back to a few of those high school reunions, where you see people that you haven't seen for 30 or 40 years, and inevitably people, they're trying to catch up. So people say to me, no, what do you do now for a living? This goes badly every time. You know, like I remember this one guy, he said, what do you do? I said, I'm a minister. And he was like, back to the bar. And this other guy, I thought this was good. He said, oh, that's a shame. And I said, why is that a shame? He said, well, in high school you were so smart. And generally they just laugh their heads off. You just get no respect at home. Jesus comes home, and they don't just laugh their heads off. They actually get really annoyed with him, and they start to throw him off a cliff. He's barely able to survive with his life. He got isolated, you see, and I think he knew you always need good company. So he didn't send them out one by one. He sent them out two by two. We always need to go out with others. We're ramping up our mission program this year, and one of the things they're going to ask you to do is just something like, if you volunteer to go somewhere, take somebody with you. Like call a friend and say, I'm going to go do this. I'm going to do this tutoring thing. Come do it with me. Anytime we do good in the world, we do it with somebody else. Any good that happens in our life, it's because of somebody else. If you believe in God, that's not something you did on your own. You owe that to somebody. Somebody has blessed you. When I went off to seminary with my friend Tom, I'm not sure I would have gone if Tom hadn't been going. I'm not sure Tom would have gone if I hadn't been going. We didn't know what we were doing, but we had good company when we went. We're still close friends. And the way relationships play out over time is really interesting. Last Sunday night, I'm watching the Panthers game, like everybody else on planet Earth. And it's midway in the first half, and I get this message from a guy named Brad, who's the pastor of the Highlands United Methodist Church in Denver, Colorado. And he says, well, it looks like you guys are going to win, and we're in, so we're going to be in the Super Bowl. 2 years ago, when we were in the Super Bowl against Seattle, the Methodists in Denver challenged the Methodists in Seattle to see who could raise the most food. He said, we creamed them. And then he adds, and we're going to cream you too. I said, no, we're trash talking. It's not even halftime yet. It's great fun. You got to back me up. Brad cannot defeat me on this thing. It's very important. See, that wouldn't have happened if we hadn't become friends over time. It's 2 by 2. Relationships always matter. And the other thing that's interesting is Jesus sends them out 2 by 2. He doesn't say, stay where you are, and if somebody needy comes up, try to do something for them where you are. No, Jesus says, go out, go away from here 2 by 2. And try to do some good in the world. This whole business of going out, when I did my program on Pope Francis, it's pretty interesting. I mean, the Catholics have the best buildings in the world. Let's just face it. I mean, St. Peter's, the Vatican, churches, they don't have the prettiest church in Charlotte. We do. But they have nice buildings everywhere. But what the Pope says over and over is he says, we need people to come to our buildings. He never says that. He says, we need to get out of the building. His image is that Jesus is trapped inside the church, and we need to open the door and let him out. And when we let him out, we need to follow him out into the world. Jesus sent the disciples out. And the problem when we go out, you see, I mean, I understand this. The problem when we go out is we're not so confident when we go out. When we're in here, we're pretty confident because we're with each other. We kind of look alike. We kind of know how to navigate this. People here are like us. You kind of know what to say. You don't say too many dumb things. Like you know the routine. You know, nobody too weird here. Well, a couple of you are a little weird here, but you know, we're here. But if you go out in the world, you encounter all kinds of people that are different, and you just don't know, like, what's going to happen out there, and you don't understand the people out there. I mean, the most comical stuff that I hear is people like us diagnosing what people's lives out there are like. I hear people do this all the time. Wealthy charlatans will say, I know what poor people are like. I know what their problem is. You have no clue what their problem is. See, what do you think you know? Or with a matter of race. We have Shannon Sullivan coming tomorrow from UNC Charlotte. She's written a lot about this, of how white people misunderstand black people, actually how white people misunderstand white people. We're not even real good at that. And if we're going to go out there, how do we understand people and how do we listen to people? You know, I had a friend in seminary whose name was Greg. And Greg, he was just something. He was blind. And we hung around together a lot, and people would come up to him all the time, and they would say, hey, Greg! And he'd say, I'm blind, I am not deaf. I was with him on 2 different occasions where you're having a conversation, and somebody's talking about race, and some very noble person says the following, I'm colorblind, I'm colorblind. I don't see color. And Greg was funny. He'd say, I'm colorblind. He said, but I can tell a white guy from a black guy every time. It's just different. You have different experiences. You have different backgrounds. You are read differently everywhere you go because of who you are. So how are we going to engage out there in the world? This is such a challenge. I mean, when we go 2 by 2, relationships are always so tricky, aren't they? Same with getting married here, it's like a great thing. It's been hard at times. I was talking to a couple the other day, came in for counseling. They said, we're a little embarrassed to admit it, but we fight sometimes. Like, okay, I'm going to take a poll Sunday and see who are the couples that never fight. We just fight sometimes, and the question is, how do you fight and what do you do with it? And I love this, the singer-songwriter David Wilcox wrote this song one time. I love this. He says, all right, you're having an argument with the one that you love, and it's taking her forever to figure out that she's wrong, right? And that you're right. He said, but then you keep going at it, and then at some point, she expresses her point of view so succinctly that suddenly you get it, and it makes perfect sense. And you're so inside her point of view that I actually forgot what you were thinking was right a minute ago that you thought she was so wrong about. You have the same dots that you've connected, but you connected them this way, but then she connected them that way. And once you really look at it, you think, oh, it's like that image of when a couple's having trouble. I think who said this? Like, instead of getting an attorney, be each other's attorney, right? Like, I'm going to represent your case as best I can. Okay, so what you think is, and you just say it just as best you can. And then the other person says the same thing. I'm going to express if we could do this, we'd be fine. You know what I'm saying? But we never do that. We only see kind of our viewpoint. We only see our viewpoint. And we're so big on being right and who else is wrong, and we forget what really matters and all of that. I don't know about you. When I heard this business about Jesus sent the disciples out 2 by 2, you know who I thought of? Maybe you did too. I thought about those Mormons that you see sometimes in your neighborhood, right? You can spot them a mile away. They're dressed in black suits, and it's 2 handsome young men, and they're walking. And Mormons get ridiculed. I had tickets, last year to Blumenthal to the Book of Mormon. I mean, crass, crude ridicule, mockery of Mormons. And it's got some humor in it. I'll grant you that. But I'll be honest with you. When I see Mormons like that, I don't think, they believe dumb things, or they believe differently from me, or how could they be so wrong? That never crosses my mind. When I see them, I think, like, wow. Right? Like, how impressive. Like, young men in the prime of their life, and they do this for God. And, people laugh at it and give them a hard time, but they keep going. They do that for God, and it makes me feel a little small. Like, what am I doing for God? What are we doing for God? Do we do something hard for God? When we're on our prime of life, what do we do for God? We believe really differently, but I can admire them. We can be friends. It's all about relationships at the end of the day. What's amazing in this gospel story is Jesus has the disciples there, and he sends them out 2 by 2, and what he says is, I want you to perform the same miracles that I've been performing. And you can imagine, they're like, are you kidding me? You're the Messiah. You're God walking around in the flesh. But they go out, and they actually surprise themselves and work a few miracles. Now, I've tried to think about that. How does that happen? How could you and I work a few miracles? And I think it's way easier than we think it is. Here's an example. And I've told a few of you this before, so bear with me if you've heard it before. When I was a little boy, I spent a lot of time with my grandfather, Papa Howell, up in Oakboro, North Carolina. And he was a faith healer. He's actually a Southern Baptist. He sang in the choir, and during the sermons, he did, I can't keep an eye on you guys. His preacher couldn't either. During the sermons, one of 2 things would happen. Sometimes he'd say, amen. You can do this at any point if you feel led to. But sometimes he would fall asleep, and I would say, Papa Howell's asleep in the choir. But he was a faith healer, and I'd have various maladies as a child, and he could cure me every time. For instance, I would have hiccups. And I would get the hiccups, and you couldn't get them to stop. And people would run at me with the usual cures, put sugar under your tongue, blow into a bag, hold your breath, all of these things. Papa Howell said, I got it. He would take me and he would sit me on his lap like this, and he would whisper something in my ear, and he would take his knuckles and he would just tap out this pattern on my back. And the hiccups just went away every time. My children came along. They had hiccups. Poor Lisa didn't know any better. She's telling them, blow in a bag, put sugar under your tongue, drink water upside down, all this stuff. I'm saying, Lisa, I've got this. I put them on my lap, tap out the little pattern, hiccups are cured. They'll do this for their children one day. Let me suggest to you how the healing actually happened. I don't think it's the pattern of knuckles on the back at the end of the day that was the healing. I think the healing was the relationship. This was somebody I trusted. This was somebody I believed in. I believed he could heal me. It was the relationship that was the healing. I'm positive about this. Jesus calls us to go out and to build relationships with people who are not like us. And when we do that, there will be healing. There will never be any healing in our world as long as we're just with people like us. It's just how it is. Jesus is wanting to get out of the building, and he wants us to open the door and let him out and follow him out there. And if we go out there, we will work miracles. And I'll tell you the miracles that will work because they're so odd in our society. What happens in our society when there's a problem? You know what happens. There's anger and there's rage and there's frustration, and people are speaking their minds, and this is the way of the world, and Jesus just grieves over this. It just breaks Jesus' heart. What Jesus is looking for is something that we could actually do out there in the world, and that's go out there with just a little compassion, a little bit of love, a little bit of listening, a little bit of understanding. That would be a miracle. It's a miracle we can do, going out two by two. Thanks be to God.